Hey, folks, you're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it, so let's get right to the interview. Today, we have Natalie Allen with us. She is a dietitian and all things nutrition. She's an expert on all that kind of stuff, and she works for Missouri State University. So, we're going to dive into her career and all the different rabbit holes that it presents. So, Natalie, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off like we always do. Give us a little bit of a history about Natalie, where you were born and your kind of early influences, and we'll just go from there.
Great. I was born here in Springfield, Missouri, so have lived here most of my life. I did live in St. Louis for some time when I did what's called a dietetic internship, which you have to do to become a registered dietitian. I
Hmm.
did that in St. Louis at WashU School of Medicine, and so I got my graduate degree while I was in St. Louis, and then I met my husband at Missouri State University where I did my undergrad, and he was my organic chemistry lab partner. So I always tell my students, you never know what class could change your life.
Yeah,
And then we um, had kids, and we decided to move back to Springfield to live closer to our families. So I've been in Missouri, and it's great. I love it, and I love working for the university.
good. So let's look back to when were your early influences where you thought this career might be for me, or was it a happy accident where you took a class that just kind of launched your interest and therefore a career? Or walk me through how it all kind of played out.
Sure. It was kind of an organic luck type thing. Bad luck that turned into good luck, I guess you would say. So,
Okay.
my dad was a basketball coach. And so we grew up around sports. I did a lot of sports, and it was just part of my life to be an athlete. And he helped really instill being active. He was a health teacher. And so he also promoted that in our home. And when I went to school in high school, I got a stress fracture in my foot, which is something you get from overtraining or maybe not great nutrition, or it can be biomechanics. There's lots of reasons you get them.
Mhm.
And at that time, I met with a dietitian to work on my diet to help me in my sports nutrition. And I guess you'd say the rest is history. So I decided I wanted to work in healthcare, but I wanted a job that was a little bit more prevention focused and flexible, because I knew that while I wanted to help patients and be with people, I also probably wanted to have a good balance between my family and my marriage and my job. And dietetics helped me to be able to do that.
So, what were the first steps that you took when you've decided that this is what I want to do? What steps did you take to progress forward in that career?
So I met with a couple people who were dietitians, and they gave me the lowdown on the career. And I think what really struck me when I was deciding to go into dietetics is it's a career with a lot of variety. So what I tell my students is we can work with babies, which I've done in a NICU setting, or you can work with the elderly, right? You can work with well people, like in the community, a community garden focus, an education focus, or you can work with people in a hospital and trying to help them feel better and use nutrition to heal. You can also work like I do with sports teams, or you could do education. I've done a lot of media for dietetics and a lot of public education, trying to get the word out there about myths and nutrition and what's fact versus fiction. So that was what was most appealing to me in dietetics. And so I met with different people when I was trying to decide my career path, and it really drove home the point that if you want to do something different in dietetics, you don't have to go back to school. There's a lot of jobs in different realms that all sounded really appealing to me.
That's one thing I think when folks are looking at a career that they want to know, is this a one trick pony as far as I'm a dietitian and I only do this? Or, but what you just described, there are endless possibilities as far as specialization goes. You can just take off with athletes or with the elderly, and those are going to be two different lanes.
Yes, correct. 100% best thing about the career is the variety. And you can also really forge your own way. food connects all of us. It's one of the only things really that, I mean, you make a decision about food 10 times a day, and so do I. And so we're looking at food really is impactful, and everybody eats. So I like to say everybody eats, so everybody needs a dietitian. And I think that helps my students when they want to think about different career paths or helping different populations. Some of them think about lactation, being a lactation specialist and breastfeeding. Other ones go into public policy on nutrition. I have
Mm.
some that focus more on cultural competence and things related to that. Some of them really want to look at food insecurity. Others want to work with a professional football team. And all of those things you do with one degree and being an RDN, which is a registered dietitian nutritionist.
The classes that you will typically start off taking, are there any in high school that you can take beside? I mean, I think they require basic health courses, but are there any classes you can take in high school and then to parlay into college besides your general classes? What do you want to focus on if this is something of interest to you?
Sure, great question. And dietetics does have a very heavy science base.
Okay.
So, um, in high school, I would recommend taking a dual credit chemistry class, maybe a dual credit biology class. You also, as a dietitian, have to be a great communicator because you're communicating the nutrition plan to other people, or you're communicating appropriate nutrition education to the public. And so, a speech class, being a good public speaker, a technical writing, so you can write and do good, share appropriate information that way. Those would all be good foundational classes. I also have a lot of students who transfer in maybe a statistics class, so you can
Hmm.
understand research and evidence-based practice better. So those are some good ideas. Once you get into college, it is very similar to any healthcare track in that you're going to be taking classes like anatomy,
Uh,
physiology, organic chemistry. There's a genetics component, metabolism. So there is a science base, no doubt. And then, of course, there's lots of different nutrition classes.
I want to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I don't want to put you on the spot. But when you look at the subject of diet, if you go to YouTube and type in diet, you are overwhelmed with low carb, high fat, fasting, vegan, carnivore. It's it's sometimes kind of it's laughable, but in 2025 there's still so much confusion about what we should eat to be healthy. And then you'll say, well, the Europeans eat carbs and they're thin. And in America, we have a weight problem. And so we say to avoid carbs or some carbs. And then athletes need carbs. It's kind of exhausting. You can suffer from paralysis by analysis as far as what do I eat to be healthy? Are there any foundational, I guess, tenets that you use to move forward where it's like, look, I don't care what you're doing. These are the things that I would recommend everybody do.
Yes, 100%. There are things we know that are proven that you should do. So I completely agree with you. There's a lot of confusion. And when you look online, my advice to people is look at who is making the video or sharing the information. Is it somebody like a registered dietitian, or somebody in the healthcare, like a physician? That those people are going to have the background and the knowledge to share evidence-based practice.
Mm.
It's really easy for us sometimes to get hop on a trend or a bandwagon in nutrition that isn't backed by science. And what I have seen in my practice is then it's just making it really complicated and hard to eat. And food should not be that complicated.
Right.
So it shouldn't be taking up a ton of time or money or brain space. And so if we can go back to kind of your three foundations of good nutrition, it's variety. Are you eating a variety of foods? Are you following a moderation of things that maybe we don't need a ton of? So the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time, eat healthy things. 20% of the time, have a treat if you'd like.
Sure.
And then balance. Are you balancing what you're eating with activity and exercise. So you bring up a great point with the European population, and our son studied abroad in Spain, and so we went to visit him, and you notice certainly differences in their food, but also probably one of the biggest differences is that their cities are set up to walk everywhere.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so they're just naturally burning more calories that way. Their portion sizes are also smaller, and there's a variety of different things. They don't, but because they walk, a lot of people there get food and groceries to make for dinner that night. And so then they have to go to the grocery store then again the next night because they're walking. You don't want to carry, 20 bags of groceries. And
Sure.
so uh, they tend to eat more fresh things also because of that reason. But for my clients, I always go back to variety, balance, moderation, and doing things that work for you, but certainly eliminating entire food groups. There are definitely things you need to pause if that's your choice you're making, and there are times we need to. Food allergies, you have an illness, something
Sure.
like that. But but generally, when you cut out a whole food group, then you're gonna have to think, "How am I gonna get the nutrients that are typically in that food group?" So, for example, you're gonna cut out meat. You wanna become vegetarian or vegan. Okay, no problem. But then we need to look at, how are you gonna get protein
Mhm.
and zinc and iron, right? How are you going to get some of those nutrients that are more prevalent in meat? It's not impossible by any means. You can do that eating vegetarian protein sources, but then you need to ask yourself, do I like tofu and edamame and lentils and beans? Am I willing to eat those things? And do I know how to cook them? Right? And is my family willing to help me on that journey? And do they want to eat those things? So I think when we look at dieting, I always tell people, let's be realistic, right? And let's think about things that you love and that you don't ever want to give up. Whether for some people that's chocolate, other people that's potato chips. So I'm like, it's okay. We can figure out how you can have some of those even a little bit every day, right? So we're not then feeling unsatisfied and wanting to just eat a whole bunch of chocolate by the end of the
Mhm.
day. And I think that's the trick on anything you see online. So if you're seeing someone online that's recommending a lot of supplements or very expensive pathways, lots of testing that you need to have done, or eliminating a lot of things from the diet, I would pause, and I think the next thing is try to find a registered dietitian to help you. And the third thing is look at the science. We're smart people. You can go on and look in a peer reviewed journal and say, hey, should I eliminate fiber completely from my diet? Probably not. And here's what research shows us.
You gotta have a game plan going into it is what I'm hearing you. Whatever path you're gonna go down, you need to have a game plan and then be honest with yourself in that, am I gonna stick with this or not?
Sure, absolutely. You know, short-term diets, you might lose a little bit of weight, but generally it's going to be that yo-yo effect, and you might even gain more back than you've lost once you stop
Mm,
following the diet. So I would focus on being more active. Most Americans could spend more time being active, and I know it's hard, but how can you do that? If you're studying, could you walk? There's study treadmills now that you can walk on while you study. If you're a parent and you're bringing your child to soccer practice, could you walk around the soccer field while they practice? Right? Just how can we move a little bit more? Can you play basketball outside with your kid after dinner? Right? Little things like that make a big difference. And then look at little things as far as your diet. Can you make general health suggestions like, okay, I'm going to try to avoid fried foods. I'm
okay.
not going to drink drinks with calories. I'm going to eat a fruit or vegetable at every meal because those have less calories and more nutrition. So little things can add up, but it does need to be a conscious effort and it requires planning. So set aside a time to plan your meals for the week, especially dinner.
One more question in this rabbit hole, and then I promise we'll get back to the education side of things.
Sure.
Um, It this is a gross oversimplification, but when I look at vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, low carb, etc., all these different ways of eating, even fasting, they have two commonalities. One of them is you're probably going to be eating less and you're going to be eating zero or very little fast food, soda, Skittles, Oreos, junk food. And I think that that's a big difference, at least what I see between the Europeans and us, is that yes, they'll have a nice pastry every now and again, but it'll only have 7 or 8 ingredients versus 39, and half of them are chemicals. And then they're walking to get that dessert, and then they're walking home. Is there, I know that's gross oversimplification, but is that
No,
pretty
no.
accurate?
There is, and it's you bring up a great point that we actually have a lot of new research right now, that's coming out on what we're calling processed foods. And so,
Okay.
what's tricky is we don't have a super clear definition of what constitutes a processed food, but,
Sure.
probably fair to say the things you mentioned would all fall in that category.
Mhm.
And so, um, I think there's data to show that the more processed food you eat, the less healthy you are. And
Okay.
so, again, maybe we go back to, certainly you can have a scoop of ice cream that you make or that you buy, because ice cream could have less additives than some other things.
Mhm.
But, um, trying to focus on fewer ingredients and things you can pronounce as far as the ingredients in foods is a
Okay.
great idea. Or make it yourself, right? If you're willing to learn how to cook or you know how to cook, and that's not realistic for everything,
Mhm.
but certainly for there's a lot of great recipes on the internet, right? So, try to figure out planning and making things at home generally are healthier and less processed than things that we buy out.
Okay. Yeah, there's a million YouTube channels about how to cook things. If you're not, a foodie or somebody that knows how to cook, you can certainly.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, and my athletes here, I tell them, "Ask your parents to give you their old crock pot or an Instapot."
Yeah.
Those are both really good ways to cook protein, and
Mm.
that's one of the hardest things for my students here is how do they cook meat? And meat's not something you can, just cook on the fly. Like, you can brown hamburger, but if it's frozen when you got home at 4 o'clock, you're gonna have a little bit of a dilemma here. So,
Mhm.
I like batch cooking that and starting with getting, maybe cook 5 chicken breast on a Sunday and then use those in various ways, over the next few days for lunch and dinner. Make a wrap, make a pasta, add rice, make a chicken fried rice, make a barbecue chicken sandwich, a barbecue chicken pizza. So, but you have that base of the protein because you do need protein, and protein's also what helps you feel full and satisfied. And
Mhm.
so we want people to have a protein source at each meal.
So thanks for indulging me. Let's go back to the education side of things. You're in college, you're taking all of your classes, you're winding up that time. What was your first step out of college into the real world of working as a dietitian in your field?
Great question. So I graduated from Missouri State University with my bachelor's degree in dietetics, and then you have to do a dietetic internship. That's
Oh,
required now. It was required then, and um, that is like a supervised practice, kind of like student teaching. If you've had a student teacher in high school
okay.
or elementary, and so it's about a little over 1,000 hours where you are with registered dietitians and you see them working and they're precepting or helping you understand things in the field. So I did that at Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis and St. Louis Children's Hospital. And that was with WashU School of Medicine. And I learned so much working at a teaching hospital, where there's med students and PA students and OT and all that. It was a fantastic experience. And I also got my master's then in education. And then I got a job at Barnes Jewish Hospital. And so I always tell my students, where you do grad school and your internship, it's a great networking opportunity. And they learn a lot about you and you learn a lot about them. And so I was very fortunate then to get a job, and I worked clinically in the hospital for a few years, and it was great. I learned so much. I appreciate my health, and I'm just a better person having worked with children that were ill, cancer patients, transplant patients. It was just a really humbling and a really educational experience. And I had an awesome medical team that I worked with that we're still friends to this day. And so I did that for a few years. And then while I was at Barnes Jewish, I did a lot of media work and for promoting nutrition to the public, like on TV or on a podcast or on
Hmm.
the radio. And so I did that for a while and worked for large food corporations as well. Um, Most corporations have a dietitian, even like McDonald's has a dietitian. So everybody has a dietitian, right? And
Yeah.
so that was super fun for me because it was such a different side of dietetics, looking at how they make decisions on what's on the menu, or working with farmers to grow enough lettuce to make a salad at their fast food restaurant. So, looking at what drives market decisions, educating the public about different options. So that was a really cool thing. While I did that, I also worked for Barnes Jewish still and went to schools in the St. Louis area and taught nutrition to kids. And it was the best, so fun, right? I worked with kindergarten through 12th grade, and it was a grant funded project. And we went to city schools, county schools, private, public, everybody. And we taught this at that time, what were the health standards for the state of Missouri to school age children. And it was super fun. I wrote the curriculum. We jumped around, we played games, we made cool crafts, we ate fun snacks. And I did that for over a decade. And it was just a really great way to meet people in the community, to teach others about the path of dietetics, and how to take control of their health at a younger age. So I did that for a while and it was awesome. And while I did that, working at Barnes, uh, Barnes had the contract with several professional sports teams in St. Louis. And so I then became their dietitian as well. So my job was twofold. I taught elementary children and then I did professional sports teams in St. Louis.
Wow.
And that was a really fun part of my job for a long time. So I got to work with professional athletes in the NFL, the NHL, and Major League Baseball. I've worked with Olympics teams and seeing how can they improve performance through nutrition.
That's a lot to unpack, and that's very impressive. I have a soft spot in my heart for Children's Hospital and Barnes Jewish. My oldest son Cooper, got a kidney transplant there when he was 4.5,
Oh, wow.
and they took the kidney out of my wife over at Barnes and walked it over to Children's, and then put it in him. And so we have spent a lot of time in both of those hospitals, and I have nothing but appreciation and respect for them. So
Good. I'm
the
glad they're doing okay. It's an amazing I tell people it's an
oh yeah,
amazing place to go
yeah,
if you need something like a kidney transplant.
yep,
I don't know that I go there, to get stitched up. It's a big hospital.
yeah,
As you know, it's hard to navigate at
it
times, but
is.
um, if my kids need anything, that's a really great place to be. So I'm glad your kids are okay, and hopefully they had a
Oh, yeah.
dietitian who helped your wife and your son
They did.
at
Yeah.
St. Louis. Yeah, so great place. And one advantage of working in a larger hospital setting like that is there are just so many opportunities that come to you in healthcare.
Oh,
So
I
whether
bet.
you're a nursing student, dietetics, OT, PT, PA, that's what's great about that setting. There's some hard things about that setting, but
Mhm.
for me, it was a really great springboard for my career, and I got exposed to a lot of different people and made great connections.
I almost use the term residency, but your internship, it's kind of like your version of a residency that you did
Correct.
for 1,000 hours. Is that typically, like, industry wide? Is that a typically a paid thing is that part of their education where that's going to be pretty rough on you financially while you get through it, but then on the backside it's worth it?
Great question. It depends. So,
Okay.
um, I would say the majority are not paid.
Okay.
And so I have some students who take a year off in between undergrad and grad. because now it's required. It changed just a couple years ago where you have to have a master's degree to be a dietitian. So
Okay.
when you get your internship, you're also going to graduate school. Those are a combined thing typically.
Wow.
Um, and so there are definitely some paid. The Veterans Affairs, the VA, they have paid options, but the majority are not paid. And so I have a lot of people who will take a year off and save up,
Hmm.
or they'll move back home so they can, like, we have students here at Missouri State that apply. There's some in the Kansas City and St. Louis areas, and they'll go to those because they can live at home and save money that way. There's also a dietetic internship graduate program here at Missouri State. It's a little bit more reasonably priced than some of the other ones. So I tell my students, take into account the financials, right? You need to
Sure.
look at that. And most internships and grad programs have an emphasis. Here at Missouri State, ours is public affairs and rural health. So there's a need for healthcare practitioners in the rural setting. So we have a fantastic director. We have a great program here. Others might have more of an emphasis, let's say, on sports nutrition. Some of them have an emphasis in pediatrics. Some are more community based. So I want my students to look at those and decide on their internship based on that pathway as well.
Is the internship that you're doing, is that typically when someone is going to, because you're being exposed to so many things, that's usually when they kind of start seeing the avenue they want to go or the area of specialization they want to follow?
Yes, it's a great time to get a taste of everything and then
Okay.
decide that. And a lot of dietitians start in clinical work, which is in the hospital. And some of my students are like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then I'm like, just try it. You learn so much. And
Mhm.
there's a need for clinical dietitians. And um, a lot of them will come out of their internship telling me, I liked clinical more than I thought. And I am going to start there. It may not be where they want to stay their whole career, but it is a good beginning step for a lot of people.
Are the folks that go into professional sports like you dealt with the St. Louis teams, are they like the rock stars of your of your industry?
Well, it kind of depends, you know? Um, a lot of people want to do sports nutrition and
Mhm.
it's probably a little bit more visible and high pressure, I guess I would say too.
Yeah,
But at the same time, some people are like, I don't like athletics and I don't want to do that. And I'm like, that's
sure.
okay. There's other options in dietetics that you can do just as easily. So for me, the sports nutrition was a natural next step because I had been an athlete and had a dad who was a coach and liked sports and understood that world. And so I moved from professional Olympic teams, and now I'm the dietitian for all of our athletes here at Missouri State. We have 21 teams and almost 600 athletes. So um, that what I like about sports nutrition is it is where most people want to see me and want to get better because they want to win.
Yeah.
Athletes are typically competitive. They're very, very performance driven. So if I can change their diet and they can help me with those changes, and that's going to help them perform better and have less injury and less cramping on the field or whatever it might be, they are all in. And that's what I love about working with athletes is they're generally very motivated to make changes.
It's you tell them this is what you need to do and they've bought in and they're going to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. And our coaches, we have awesome coaches here at MSU that are helping us, and everybody's bought in. There's a great medical team with athletic trainers, our team physicians, a team psychologist, and myself. And so we all work together to help the athlete. And I always emphasize there's three things we're trying to do for our athletes here. One of them is to keep them healthy, right? Health is your number one goal for all of us.
Sure.
And then number two, we want them to get a good education. We want them to graduate. Most of them are not going to do a sport after college. So,
Mhm.
get your degree, get your good education. We have great faculty and teachers here at Missouri State. And then third, we want them to win. Right. We want them to enjoy being a part of their team and have a great experience, not be injured and win. So I think I have to do research as part of my job here. And so some of my research is focused on, particularly female athletes. I have a great research team, and it's like, how can we help prevent injury through nutrition or whatever, screening tools, um, team, the medical team working together so that they're not missing games and practice and time away from their sport. And we've been able to do some of that. And I feel really good about that.
I want to pull a question out of your training with professional athletes. Is there anything that you recommend to athletes that your everyday person who just has an office job? Are there any kernels of knowledge that apply to people, whether they're an athlete or not? Or is it really situation specific?
Well, certainly there's some overlap. I think with athletes, generally they can just eat more calories, right?
Okay.
So, and my a lot of my athletes, I mean, they're working out hours and hours a day, right?
Mhm.
And they're lifting more weights than they've ever done, and they're training and conditioning. So we want them to be eating more calories. And where you get your calories from matters. And so if you're have a desk job, maybe I'm going to steer you to getting more of your carbohydrates from fruits and vegetables and having a plate that's maybe half fruits and vegetables and then a fourth meat and a fourth a carbohydrate like a starch.
Mm.
Whereas if you're an athlete, it might be a little different. We might flip that. You might have more carbohydrates from a starch like rice or bread, or we might be adding more omega-3 fatty acids, the good fats that help lower inflammation because inflammation is very common in an athlete. Like think of a baseball pitcher who is constantly using his shoulder, right, to throw that ball over and
Yeah.
over. So he's going to have inflammation there. So we work a lot with what foods can we add in to help you feel better and be less likely to be injured.
Salt is something that has been, talked about more recently. People are talking about it from a hydration standpoint. Am I seeing a shift away from being scared of salt? I mean, I'm sure some folks, if they have a medical reason why they shouldn't consume additional salt or keep it on the low end, that's a different setting. But for athletes and folks, is salt becoming more used nowadays?
Salt is trendy right now, for
Yeah.
sure. I just did a nice little piece for Nike, and it talks about should you use salt in your hydration drinks?
Hmm.
And the short answer is probably you don't need it unless there are certainly times. Sodium or salt is very important to maintain fluid balance in your body. We all need sodium. However, most people in America get plenty because remember back to our processed food conversation,
Oh, yeah.
processed foods have a lot of salt and we like salty things. And so generally, we are getting enough in our diet. Now, there are caveats to that. If it's really hot and humid and you're sweating a lot and you're losing a lot of sodium through your sweat, you might need to replace some in your body. If you're somebody who doesn't ever cook with salt and you don't eat processed foods and you don't add salt to your food, we might need to talk about that a little bit. So, or for an athlete who struggles with muscle cramps, salt can be very, very important because salt does help you retain fluid. And when you're cramping, we have to look at, there's a lot of pieces to it, but one piece might be that your cells need a little bit more fluid in them, and adding sodium can help get that fluid into the cell. So that's why sports drinks have sodium in them. And adding salt to your food might be necessary. That's why pickles help when somebody's cramping. They're very salty. They also have vinegar, which plays another role in preventing cramps. So, salt is good and we need it, but it's like everything. We don't want to get too much.
Sure. What would you say if I just asked you right now, what is your most enjoyable aspect of your job? What would you say?
Oh, 100% my students.
Okay.
Um, my students in my classes, I teach in the nutrition and dietetics program, and they are fantastic. We are so fortunate. We have great students. I have wonderful colleagues. We have 6 dietitians that work together to educate our students. And then also in that, when I say students, my student athletes, right? So I have a really great job in that it's kind of in 2 different realms, but they overlap and they help each other. And I love being able to just help prepare people to go out into the workforce and hopefully do a job they love. I've met so many great people. We have a lot of great faculty and staff and administration here at Missouri State, and I'm just lucky to be a part of it.
The the unfortunate reality is that every job has an aspect that we don't like or a negative. Even someone who is like, this is what I'm made to do. I'm in my lane when I'm doing whatever I'm doing. What is there something that you dislike about your job, or is there an aspect of it you wish you could do away with to make it perfect?
Good question. Grading papers takes a
Oh,
lot of
sure.
time,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
that's necessary.
Yeah.
I also something I didn't think about when I started as a dietitian, I have to write medical chart notes, to be
Mm,
part of the medical record on every athlete I see. It's not bad, it's necessary, but it does take time, and that's something I find myself doing sometimes at night because I see so many people during the day, I have to chart at night, so I'm constantly keeping on top of that because you want that medical record to be accurate and up to date. And then one part of my job I didn't think I would like, but I've come to like it, is I am required to do research and publish. That's part of academia. And um, that was a really big learning curve for me and not something I thought I wanted to do necessarily. Research is very time consuming. It's
yeah.
gathering a lot of data. It's a lot of tedious things that you have to look at, but we need good research out there to guide us on our healthcare decisions. And so I've been fortunate now to be a part of some great research teams and we've gotten published several times. And so that was when I'd say I was all grumpy about having to do, but now I'm like, okay, that wasn't so bad.
This is a question just out of curiosity for me. You're dealing with different athletes in various sports. I, am I am I correct in that the football players eat the most,
That's everybody thinks that, but
or
no.
swimmers? Swimmers?
Swimmers. It is swim at Missouri State.
Okay.
Our swimmers, male swimmers, all of them, but generally male have a little bit more muscle mass and are taller, so they need a little bit more
Mhm.
calories. They swim about 10,000 yards a day
Good
when they're
grief.
in their heavy training. That is a lot. Our swim team here has been very successful. They practice morning and afternoon. So, swim burns a ton of calories. And some of our linemen and the football is different because it's very dependent upon your position on how many calories you need.
Sure.
So, certainly some of our football players need a lot of calories, and then some of them need to be quick and fast and zippy and don't need as many calories. So, I would say that's a test question on one of my I teach the sports nutrition class, and one of the
Okay.
test questions is, "Which team at Missouri State burns the most calories?" And the answer is swim.
Was it Michael Phelps that I guess in the Olympics there was rumored he was eating about 10,000 calories a day?
Yes, I remember reading that, and that's he's a tall guy too, so that
Yeah.
factors into it, but certainly most of my male swimmers here are eating at least 5,000, 5 to 6,000 a day, and honestly, that's hard to get in,
Yeah.
right? So, we sit down and we're like, "Okay, what can you drink to get calories?" Now we're doing the opposite things, right? How can we add calories to your food? What sauces or dips can you use that have some nutrition, but also will add calories and flavor? So, it's a different game when we're trying to get someone to gain weight versus lose weight.
Yeah, that's a pretty good problem to have when you're trying to put on weight, I think, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
jealous
I
of those
always tell
folks.
them, "You cannot eat like this when you graduate and you don't swim
Right.
anymore." So we do actually do a session for our athletes when they graduate on how to eat in the real world, because when you go from being a football player to being an accountant and you're sitting
Sure.
more, sometimes it doesn't go smoothly, so we
Yeah.
do work on that too.
What changes have you seen in your industry since you were graduating from college and starting your internship to now? Have there been
Oh
any
gosh,
big
so many
shifts?
changes, so many
Technology?
changes.
Technology, or is it just the
Yeah,
data?
technology for sure, apps and things that track your
Sure.
calorie intake or things that
Okay.
track your activity level. I think social media has been a really big change as well, and not necessarily as good as I would like.
Yeah.
There are accurate and good things in social media related to nutrition, but there's a lot of quackery and a lot of people preying on vulnerable people, like you have cancer, try this supplement and it's going to cure your cancer, and
Yeah.
that's just not true. I mean, I wish it
Mhm.
were,
Right.
but that. So I think also though, one thing I talk to my students about is that everything is trendy and comes back around. So when I started as a dietitian, fat was bad, and nobody wanted fat, and we ate things like pretzels and Snackwell's cookies, and everybody ate pasta.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, keto was really big and fat was good and you needed more fat. And now the trendy macronutrient is protein. Everybody's trying to get more protein in their food, and we're adding it to cereal, and we're adding extra protein to milk and things like that. And so I think it really lends to the bottom line that all foods can fit, and you just need a balance, right? You need to balance protein, carbs, and fat, and get a little bit of each at every meal. But it's always fun to me to see what's going to be the next trendy thing.
Yeah. Has there been any seismic shifts in your career aside from the ones you just mentioned where just the way that you conduct your job was just completely changed direction?
Hmm. I don't I don't
Any
know that I would say
research?
there's been one thing. I mean, research, uh, one thing in nutrition is a lot of things don't change that much because physiology of the body doesn't change. Metabolism doesn't. I mean, there's some nuances or things that we're learning,
Mm.
but so some older research is still foundational in nutrition. For example, like carbohydrates are important in an athlete. And so we have to think about how can they get those. Now, what foods they choose to get carbs from is up to them. Um, and so I think what I have seen more of is just helping my patients work through the confusion and the noise that they're seeing on
Yeah.
nutrition. I'll have people who are like, I think I'm deficient in magnesium. I'm like, "What? Why do you think that?" You know? Um, and so we work through that because you could be deficient in magnesium, but, here are some foods you can eat to help with that. So, I think where I've seen dietitians, we're pretty flexible and we're trying to adapt with the times and help people use food to feel better, but food also doesn't cure everything.
Right.
And so people who come to me and they're like, "Well, I don't want to take this medication that my doctor recommended because I'm going to try to fix this problem through diet." There are maybe times you can do that, like high blood pressure. We
Sure.
could maybe work on your diet, cholesterol and things like that. But some things we can't do through diet, and we do need to use the medication. So just keeping abreast of that and looking at what's accurate and knowledgeable. I think one thing that's really changed since I've started is the amount of supplements that are available and the
Yeah.
amount of supplements that people feel like they need to take. And I just don't know that that's necessary for most of us. I mean, certainly there are times I want you to take vitamins and certain nutrients and protein powders and things like that. But I think supplements have really exploded, and then following a restrictive diet of some type, like not eating gluten, not eating dairy, those things have become trendy, and it was not like that when I started it, several years ago.
What types of soft skills would benefit someone that wants to get into your line of work?
I think you have to be a great communicator to be a dietitian, and be able to be empathetic and put yourself in someone's shoes. It's hard to change diet habits.
Yeah.
You need to meet them where they are. Can they cook? Can they afford food? Do they have a kitchen? Do they have a car to get to the grocery store? Um, so that's communication and empathy are really important. I think you need to be able to think critically so you can look at science and evidence to make your decisions, and make ethical decisions related to practice. And then I think if you're going to work in the sports realm, you need to have a little confidence too. Athletes generally are pretty confident people, which is
Oh,
what you
yeah.
want, right? You
Sure.
want them to be able to take the shot when there's 1 second left on the clock.
Yeah.
And so With my athletes, I'm like, no, this is what science shows, and this is what we're going to try. Let's try it first, right? Before we go down a rabbit hole of spending $200 a month on supplements. And so that quiet, poised confidence, I think that's important in almost any job, but you do have to kind of be ready for that in dietetics and particularly the sports nutrition realm.
Yeah, the type A competitive types, you probably have to go in there knowing what you're talking about and be able to sell why your idea is better than the one that they walked in with.
Correct, 100%. And
Yeah.
so and you have to be able to do that on a level they understand. And
Yeah.
not that athletes aren't smart people, but they're not studying metabolism, that's my job.
Sure.
So, I always tell my students, we need to make this very clear and very succinct and understandable, and in like a 3 goal, maybe set 3 goals that you're gonna do before I see you the next time. So, it's very individualized and it's very, concrete. I give them specific examples. I show them foods. I have them download a grocery store app, and I show them foods to put in their cart. So we want to make it practical and easy for them. So I am understanding the science on my back of in my mind, but I'm not telling them grams of fat they need or, you know, the metabolism related to adding zinc to their diet. That's something I need to know, but I'm going to tell them, let's add a piece of meat here at dinner.
Hmm. If you could go back, when you look back on your career so far, are there any changes that you would make if you could go back and go, I kind of got that part wrong, or I should have done this instead of that? What what lessons have you learned that maybe would streamline your career path to now if you could do it over again?
I think one thing that most people don't think about is if you want to get advanced degrees. So a master's is now required. It wasn't when I started, and I did get my master's right at the start of my career, and I'm really glad. It would be hard now for me to get extra certifications or other degrees just time-wise, right? So, I
Yeah.
think if you think you wanna work in academia and wanna get a doctorate or, you wanna get a specialty certification, like there's a certified sports specialist dietitian, or there's ones that focus on, like, diabetes educators, you know, um, get those, when you have I know you may not think you have time, but get them and then enjoy them your whole career, I guess, is one thing, that I might think about. I switched from working, in the hospital and with professional teams as much to academia because it was a better work-life balance for my kids and my husband and me, and so, um, I think I feel really fortunate that I had a lot of fun opportunities in the beginning of my career, and I still do, but I had to prioritize who was gonna be home because my husband has a job where he travels, and so
Mm.
we had this sweet baby, and we're like, "Oh, wait, somebody has to be home with the baby," and so
Right.
that's when I switched to academia, and it gave me a better set schedule. I was off in the summers, and I'm glad I did that, but it was a different career path than if I had stayed and working with the professional teams as much.
Are most of the folks that do your line of work, are they introverted or extroverted, or does it really matter as long as they can develop their communication skills and whatnot?
You mean dietitians in general or sports
Yes.
dietitians?
Well, mostly dietitians in general.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of dietetics is that if you're an introvert, you can do research in a lab as
Okay.
a dietitian, right?
Okay.
You can maybe be in an area that is more introverted. Maybe you work in an ICU setting where the patients are probably not chit-chatting a whole lot with you and you're not doing education, but you're looking more at nutrition support or feeding them through a feeding tube.
Hmm.
But I'd say the majority of dietetics careers, you need to be more of an extrovert,
Okay.
and able to communicate. Because no matter what part of dietetics you're in, you need to be a good communicator. I public speak every single day, and
Mhm.
I public speak to a lot of people. I am recorded every day in my lectures. I can easily speak to 1,000 people in a conference about nutrition. So you got to get your game on, and be ready for that. The public speaking realm, at least in my role, is very common. Now, some parts of dietetics, it's not going to be as much, but even in those, you probably need to be a little bit more extroverted if you can.
The question that folks always want to know is when I talk about pay. And I'm not asking you what you make, but is there a general range of dietitians? Like you're typically going to start in this ballpark, or and then if you go into, I can see the professional athlete role being a little bit higher pay, but it's also higher pressure, higher stress. What's the industry pay kind of look like for that?
Yeah, good question. People ask me this all the time. So I tell them, you're not going to be rich being a dietitian, but you're going to be just fine,
Okay.
comfortable. Very similar to a teacher's salary, I would say, starting out.
Okay.
Um, so I'd say depends on where you work.
Sure.
Probably 45 to 50,000. Your first job would be standard. Now, if you're living in a big city, you're probably going to make more. And actually, if you're willing to work in a rural setting, they need dietitians so bad. They generally pay a little bit more as well.
Okay.
And then, you have the propensity to go up into a six-figure range over time.
Okay. Um, Failure. That's one thing that I always get feedback on from folks. You've had a successful career, but you, just like I and everybody, we do make mistakes from time to time in our careers. What is your advice for someone listening on how to deal with mistakes and failure when you make them?
100% agree failure is part of life, right? And
Mm.
um, I always tell my own kids, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Right? And so with failure, think of it as a learning opportunity. I even now as a teacher, and I've been a college teacher for a while, I'll do an assignment. I'll be like, well, that didn't work. Right. Or, I'll explain something in a lecture I'm giving and I think, okay, yeah, no, I need to revamp this. So learn from it. And then how can you make it better the next time? And for me, I'm a list person and I jot a lot of things down. So for example, if I'm teaching a new class, there's going to be things in there that don't work, right? So I have a piece of paper I literally keep in my folder where I have the all the stuff for the class. And I'll write down like, okay, I need to change this question on this exam, or I need to better explain metabolism of lipids for liver failure, right? And so then when I redo the class the next semester, I have that feedback that was like a running feedback for me. And that has really helped me because I can't remember what I taught in January, then the next
Sure.
January, what I need to change. Right. And so, but know that's part of it. Don't let it get you down. Look at it as a learning opportunity and just just hit it the next time, right? And how can I improve on this and help the people that I'm trying to help?
It's not so much a failure. It sounds like you're just constantly improving and fine tuning the information you're delivering.
Correct, 100%. And nutrition's changing all the time, like we
Yeah,
talked about. There's some
sure.
foundational, but there's some change. So I was just actually this morning reading a study that looked at the incidence of colon cancer, and it was looking at colon cancer in people who follow a very low carb, gluten-free, low carb, somewhat ketogenic diet. And like that's new research. So I need to talk about that. I need to learn about that. I need to see what are we saying? Because we sure as heck don't want anyone getting colon cancer if they can prevent it.
Yeah.
And so how can diet help with that? So I think when I think also being open and willing to understand change and how things have evolved in your field and going with it, right? And so, I don't do a lot of social media personally, but social media is a really common way that people get nutrition advice. So
Mhm.
we need to think about that. I need to help my students understand how to get appropriate nutrition information out there, and that's something that I had to learn.
Is there any other career that if you could go back and do something completely different, is there something that you've always thought, I think I might have wanted to do that. What would it have been?
Oh gosh. Well, when I was trying to decide, I was between dietetics. I also considered being a physician.
Hmm.
And I do think I would like that. Uh, Dietetics is probably a little bit better work-life balance.
Okay, yeah.
But I love the idea of helping people with their health. The other thing I got to do more in the beginning of my career, and sometimes I think, "Oh gosh, I wish I would have done more of that now," is I did a lot of news and media and health reporting on TV, and that was really fun, and sometimes I think maybe should I have pursued that? But it wasn't as, friendly for having 2 babies. And
Yeah.
so, but I like that aspect of educating and sharing information, and I like public speaking. I'm okay to be on camera and do all those things, and so I just sometimes wish we had more dietitians that were featured on, let's say, the Today Show or something like that, instead of maybe somebody who doesn't have as much of a nutrition background.
It's probably the latest flash in the pan is what's getting the most attention, and the folks that are over here just doing the work every day that, they're not ritzy and whatnot. Those are the ones that sometimes we forget they're over there, but they're doing the important work.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So if someone wanted to look more into your degree program and the classes that you teach and all that kind of stuff, is there a website, Missouri State? Do they have one that overlooks your whole department and they can get more information?
Absolutely. It's just go to missouristate.edu and then search nutrition and dietetics, and it'll pop up and it'll give you the classes that you need to take. We're really proud that almost 100% of our students are employed, and
Oh,
almost
wow.
100% of our students pass the RD exam the first time. You do have to take a nationwide exam to become a registered dietitian. So you want to ask, if you're looking at different schools, what is their pass rate on that? And we're really proud that ours is very high. And it'll introduce you to the great faculty members. I work with some really excellent dietitians here, and we all have different backgrounds, which makes us a really well-rounded faculty. So yeah, check that out. And then we also have Instagram, Missouri State Dietetics, and Facebook as well. We'd love to have people follow us there. It's a great way to see what our students are doing, either in the classroom or in the community. It also features different faculty things, just, different things happening at Mo State. And we'd love to have people follow us there as well.
That test that you just mentioned, is that a written test or a practical test or both?
Written, it's
Okay.
online.
Oh, okay.
And you are eligible to take it after you finish your graduate program with your grad degree and your number of internship hours. So,
Okay.
and then it's different than when I took it. I got a letter in the mail saying I passed, but they click a button and it says if they passed. So it does have different areas. It has like food service management, clinical or like hospital metabolism dietetics. It has community dietetics on there, questions about nutrition for throughout the lifespan, like babies versus the elderly. So it's a very comprehensive, nationally accredited exam that is required to be an RDN.
Wow. Okay. Natalie, thank you so much for this. It was really interesting to talk with you. There's way more to it than I realized, and I didn't realize there were so many different avenues that you could go once you get your certifications and whatnot. So it was extremely interesting.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. We hope people go into the field. We need good dietitians out there.
Right on. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.